Hi, I'm Sarah Novotny, and I work in the Azure Office of the CTO for Microsoft. I focus there on open source and how that open source works with Microsoft, how Microsoft works with open source, and how we invest in the ecosystem and entire industry around open source. So today I get to talk about two things that also happen in the Azure Office of the CTO. One, open source, my team, and then also there's an innovation group in that team. And we work together frequently to bring innovation out into the world through open source. So let's start with some common definitions. So open source is really straightforward. You're pretty familiar with the two things I'm going to say. You have a licensing model so that people and companies know how they can consume your code and use your code and redistribute your code. And you have a development model. That development model allows you to work collaboratively across organizational boundaries in the public and in the open, and allows for a lot of transparency on how the software is created. So innovation, what do I mean when I say innovation? Or to innovate? What I mean is making changes to a much larger system that are frequently disruptive. Does that fit with what they say here? Make changes to something established, maybe the industry, especially by introducing new methods, ideas, or products. Seems like it fits pretty well. We talk about it as disruptive. The person in the middle here has done something cool, and now everyone else has to go make changes and understand how this impacts them and their world, which is very cool. It's very disruptive, but it can also be super, super creative. Now, technology is that creative space, and open source is that canvas which we can use to go ahead and move these ideas out into the world, to share them, to disrupt our industry, and to move everyone forward. So let's start with the myths of innovation, right? There are lots of things that people think about ideas and innovation. So one of those things is that ideas show up just out of nowhere. You were just doing a thing, maybe fishing, and lo and behold, I have a brilliant idea. Well, that does happen, but that's not the only way that ideas happen. Ideas can be shared. Ideas can be offered to you. Someone could say something offhandedly, and that causes an inspiration for you. You could be working along in an area, become a subject matter expert, and realize that there's just one tiny little piece that really needs to be filled in. And that could be an innovative idea. It could be a brilliant idea. And then, of course, there's the more usual way to get to innovation, which is after a long, hard climb, trying to get through iterative work to a new idea, a new concept, something that you can bring out that will make that disruptive impact. So those are some of the myths. This, I think, is more a little bit of the reality. You have to work very hard with your innovation. And that's certainly something we see. So what we have next are really the problems around innovation. So say we have an idea. Why would you not be finishing this idea? Why would you not be executing against this idea? Well, there are lots of reasons for that too. Maybe your spirit and creativity are crushed under a whole load of crappy work. Maybe you are really struggling to just get the obvious things done, get the easy work done every day. I know a lot of people in 2020 were really struggling with this. There was so much worry and so much crap that they weren't able to be creative. That was a big common factor. Maybe you have a challenge in innovating because you have this brilliant idea, but it takes a lot more than just the idea. In the 90s and 2000s, with the first .com boom, there was a concept that the idea was the thing that had to be protected. We're a stealth mode startup. We're not going to tell you what we're doing. We're going to make sure that that's secret. I think over the last 10, 20 years, we've found that the ideas aren't the hard part, but the execution. the commitment to water your garden, the commitment to engage with your idea, the commitment to take that idea and bring it to a larger group of people, take it out and evangelize it. But that leads to another potential problem. This is the problem where people aren't hearing you, or they aren't seeing the vision that you're seeing, or it's not the right person that you're talking to. All of these are ways that it's really hard to innovate. You get stuck against an issue, a problem, a person, a corporate structure, and your idea withers. You can't make progress with it. These are all common problems. There's another one, and I think these are the two problems that are most useful in open source and are most easily addressed by open source. One, it's a huge problem. We need to make a big space in the industry to build something new. And so to do that, you need to make sure you get people together and you get a broader coalition of people thinking about this huge problem. Here's a fun example. Privacy. We have a real problem in privacy right now in the world. And we have to figure out how to make people feel more comfortable. We have to have technology not be seen as evil. And getting a group together to try to solve the problem of, say, these invasive drones, the eye in the sky, we need to figure a way that we can make people more productive, safer, healthier, more comfortable, and do all of this with technology. There are so many opportunities for us to innovate. Privacy is one area, healthcare is another area, making sure that we're bringing all of the best tech to all of the hardest problems, world hunger, racism and underrepresentation, misogyny. All of these are problems in the world, and we can bring technology and open source to innovate against those problems and make the world a better place. So we've talked about some of the problems in innovation and some of the problems in the world. Why do I think that open source is uniquely situated to solve some of these problems? First, we have the idea. The idea is not necessarily the hardest part, but then you have to go ahead and execute it. And sometimes that means you have to work in opposition to things that already exist. Open source has a long history of working in opposition to things. Sometimes it's been in opposition to big companies. Sometimes it's been in opposition to dominant ideas or in favor of an idea like information should be free. That is a revolutionary concept. And counting software as information was a revolutionary theory. Talking, of course, about the free software thesis. Open source is a little more commercial friendly, but it's still working in opposition to an exclusionary single company model in a lot of cases. So we've got the anarchist background. It's great. We can totally work in opposition. So many people have been drawn to open source for this. And this is a great way that you can empower people to innovate. People are excited to work with another group in opposition to something. People are frequently interested in trying to push the dominant paradigm and make it more available to other people. This was an example here would be Microsoft Word and OpenOffice, or the Office suite and OpenOffice. When OpenOffice came out and LibreOffice later came out, it was to bring the possibility of a typesetting like Word documentation creation on a PC to people who could not necessarily afford or didn't believe they should afford a Office license to pay for the Microsoft licenses that were there. Now, we've done this in opposition. We're trying to make things free, and that's great. So that's one of the ways that innovation, because you're pushing against something else, is really supported by open source. So there's another thing. We talked about those big problems, and big problems take large groups to fix. Open source is uniquely situated, in fact, to help bring together groups across corporate boundaries, and as individuals. And that actually comes to both that licensing model I talked about and that development level. It is uniquely situated to sit as an extra corporate engagement. One of my favorite examples of this is Kubernetes, of course. So Kubernetes is often listed as a skill or on people's resumes, sometimes ahead of their companies. They self-identify as a Kubernetes contributor who happens to work at Microsoft or VMware or Google or Red Hat. Being part of that community as an open source contributor, feeling as if you are part of a movement to change things, is incredibly important. And if you're looking to innovate, getting that core group of people together to push forward against something in order to make a new thing, to innovate and expand the possibilities in the world, that's pretty compelling. And I think open source does that way better than you might find with a closed source or proprietary or even new startup idea. We also have ways to handle conflict. Over the last 10 years, we've seen the adoption of codes of conduct, and we've seen people start to understand that working collaboratively, working transparently, authentically, kindly, and in fact with great precision and good, kind feedback is a great way to get work done. We've found that we are better able to navigate some of those community challenges than we once were. And now with these established patterns and these established ways of running a community, you have a lot more confidence that you won't be troubled by a single bad actor, or that if there is trouble from a single bad actor, you would be able to manage it within the community. There's another way that open source works really well. It brings together a group of people who are so excited about new ideas. It brings together people who have lots of different perspectives. Maybe it's from multiple companies, maybe it's from different countries, maybe it's from different parts of the country you live in, or different perspectives based on gender. Whatever it is, you're looking to bring many different perspectives together to make your project stronger, to make your innovation stronger, to make your innovation move forward and potentially change the industry. So how else is open source uniquely suited? Remember how I said ideas aren't the hard part? Well, you have to share an idea in open source, and then you have to talk about it openly and transparently, and you have to open that up even potentially to your competitors to participate. And then everyone has to execute well. That execution and that growth of that innovation, that growth of that idea needs to be nurtured and shared. And you need to take this idea and you need to seed it in a way that as you bring more people into your community, you can absorb and engage and connect with new creative ideas, different perspectives, completely different things than you may have initially imagined. But all of those different perspectives will actually make your project or your product or your open source community better. There may be more challenges in short term, but in the long term, you will have a much healthier, more dynamic community and more dynamic project being able to address more broad challenges. So with all of this that open source offers you, we've got so many different ways that we can use open source as a framework within which to innovate and move big problems, move them around, change them, work across the industry, across companies to make the world a better place. And that, to me, that's one of the reasons that I work in open source. It's one of the many reasons. But I work in open source so that I can make the world a better place in order to make it a greater community, and of course, to disrupt the industry, to make sure that we are always moving forward in a direction that makes technology more democratic, more easily consumed and much more able to integrate and fulfill the needs of a very, very broad population. So, what I hope you will all do is go forth and innovate, bringing in lots of creativity, using the resilience of a community in order to build and actually deliver upon this fantastic idea to change the world. Thank you all for joining Upstream today, and I hope you all have learned lots from the day and have little sparks of ideas to go forth and innovate. Thank you.